Hey everybody, welcome to Fit Tip Tuesday and welcome to Shirt Month. This month during Fit Tip Tuesdays, I'm going to be doing some sleeve fitting things, and I just thought to start out for today, I want to apologize for doing my videos out of order in a way. I got really excited to talk about the cap height versus cap ease last week. I forgot to show you how to determine how much ease you have, so you can decide if you need to add ease. Now, I did go over how to tell if you need to change your cap, but I'm going to review that in this video as well. And then as a side topic, I'm going to talk about bicep room, because bicep room is separate from cap height and ease. So those are the things I want to talk about today. And just as a haha, I just want to show you here, I'm going to hold my sleeves out in front of my camera. This top I'm wearing is a top I got at Target. I like to just throw it on, you know, to give myself something comfortable to wear, because a lot of my knit tops that I've made for myself are like worn out. So I do need to do some sewing for myself, and I haven't had a minute to make some more. So I saw these on at Target. I was shopping for some tops for my mom, and I got a couple for myself. But I just want to show you here why sometimes it's better to sew for yourself. If you look at these sleeves, you can see on my left arm, the underarm seam is going straight down my arm. Okay, but if you look at the right arm, my underarm seam is diagonal across, and it's actually showing up on the top of the wrist edge over here, meaning it's twisted. So that would indicate to me that this sleeve was not cut on grain to save yardage when they do the cutting to mass produce these ready to wear knit tops. I have some that I've purchased in the past that have been okay, but this one, every time I put it on, the sleeve is twisting and it drives me crazy. So that would be another reason why I'm going to roll my sleeves up and try to make all my own tops in the future. I mean, that's a fun related topic, I think. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to tell how much ease your cap has, or how much ease you have in your sleeve cap. And you can see here I've printed out the minis that I'm going to work with. And remember, if you join my mailing list, and there's a link below the video to do that, you can get a free copy of these minis. And it looks like every now and then things kind of get chopped off here. I don't know why this happened. I'm just going to recreate this right here. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I am going to cut the sleeve out so I can use it to walk the cap into the armhole. And that's how you tell if or how much ease you have. So let's do that first. I'm going to use my sharp little stiletto thing that I like to use when I'm walking a pattern. So I'm going to start with walking the back sleeve. Now, I have to flip this pattern piece upside down, so I'm just going to mark the notch through to the wrong side. And when you walk a sleeve, you line up the corner of the, the intersection of the underarm seam and the cap with the side seam and the base of the armhole. And then the other thing that's important is you want to walk your sleeve along the seam allowance. And I'm just going to dash in a seam allowance here. The reason why this is important is because on your cap, the seam allowance is a little bit smaller than the edge of the pattern, because you can see it makes a smaller curve. But on your armhole, the armhole actually gets bigger because it's a bigger curve. So it's important to either work with a pattern that doesn't have seam allowances, or just make sure when you're walking it on the seam allowance when you pivot around. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So basically I'm going to start right here, and I'm just going to use my stiletto to hold the pattern together, the two pieces together, where they line up. And then the minute the seam allowance from the cap starts to move away from the armhole, I'm just going to pivot it to match. And I don't know if you can see through the paper, but I can see the seam allowance that I drew on my armhole through the cap paper. So basically I'm just going to walk this around, and you can see that my notches match. That's good. That's a good thing. And I'm going to keep going, and actually I'm just going to mark my shoulder. You want to stop at the shoulder seam. So there's my shoulder seam. Sorry about that. So I'm just going to keep walking along here until I get to the back shoulder seam. So one thing that's important, you want to remember to walk the back armhole into the back of the cap. And that can be a mistake you can make. You can take the front of the cap and walk it into the back. You can still determine how much ease you want, but it'll be on the other side of the cap at the top. So just make sure you're walking the back of the cap into the back of the armhole here. And I'm going to just stop when I get to where the seam allowance is. I'm just going to mark that through, and I'm going to label it with a B, meaning back. So you can see here, my back armhole takes up this much space. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't consider the seam allowance on the underarm seam here, I don't need to worry about that because there's also a seam allowance on the side seam. So if you want to be super technical about it, you can start at those places. And actually, if you want to, make a note of them, you can, but the seams have all the same seam allowances usually, so usually that's fine. So if you have a 1/2 inch seam allowance here, you have a 1/2 inch seam allowance here, it's okay to start on the edge because both those seam allowances are there. The shoulder, this needs to be taken off because when you set your sleeve into your armhole, the shoulder seam is already sewn. So the seam allowance at the shoulder is not to be considered into, when you're walking the cap into the armhole, you don't want to consider the shoulder seam allowances because those are not contributing to the length of the cap. So I've got my back. Then I'm going to do the same thing to my front. And again, I'm just going to dash in a quick seam allowance. Oops. And I'm going to dash in a shoulder seam allowance like that. Now let's walk the front. Oh, and I'm just going to transfer my notch to this side so we can see it. All right, so let's walk this. So again, I'm going to start here. And I'm just going to pivot my cap along. My notch looks like it's a little off here, so I'm just going to move it over. And what we're going to find on this sleeve, and I did this on purpose, so I knew this was going to happen already, the front and back are at the same position. So if I mark that over here, so it would be the same position, the front would be right there. So that means my front and back meet at the same position, and that means that this cap has 0 ease. So what I want to show you here is, what if the front stopped here? Let's pretend, I shouldn't have marked that. Let's just pretend my front stopped here. Okay, and this is a likely situation for a woven sleeve, meaning the back armhole would take up all of this to here, and then the front armhole would come up to here like this, leaving a gap. Now, what is the gap? The gap is your ease. So the space between this blue line and this pink line is how much ease you have. So we know that this sleeve, if this were a real deal situation, would have a 1/2 inch of ease. So where is the shoulder notch, or where should the shoulder notch be? The shoulder notch, I'm just going to put that in a different color just to keep it clear, would be in the middle of that. So I'm going to put a dot right there. So that would be the notch. So what if you walked your sleeve and you ended up walking it and the front ended up over here past the back, meaning you kept walking and the front stopped somewhere to the left of the back position. That means that your pattern has negative ease. Now, if you're working with a knit garment, it's okay to have a little bit of negative ease, meaning you're going to have to stretch the cap to fit into the armhole. And some knit patterns do have that. So you can decide whether or not you want to keep that, or if you feel like based on your body shape, you want to make the cap even, you can use that information to increase the ease or increase the height of the cap depending on what your situation is. So that's how you determine how much ease you have. Now, if you remember from last week, I talked about cap height and what that needs to be to make a nice fitting sleeve, and especially on a woven pattern, because woven patterns aren't necessarily stretchy, so you need your measurements to really work with your body. So I'm just going to bring my samples I did last week here to remind you. Okay, so these are the two examples that I did last week. Here is an example of increasing the cap height. And let's say you walked your sleeve and you needed an additional 1/2 inch because our original walking here had no ease. Let's pretend this is a woven pattern, and you wanted to give yourself about a 1/2 inch of ease, which I would consider the minimal amount of ease you need for a woven shirt pattern. You may actually want a little bit more than that, but let's say we want to add a 1/2 inch of ease to this sleeve cap because it ended up, after we walked it, to have 0 ease. So we can add ease by extending the cap, or we could add ease by making the cap wider. Okay, and these are the two examples of how to do it. I'm not going to go through doing it again in this video because I already did that last week, but I just want to show you here. You're going to compare where your bicep is and then where the measurement from the tip of your shoulder down to your bicep is, and then you're going to compare that to the cap height. And if the cap height is less than your measurement from the tip of your shoulder, where you can feel that joint move down to your bicep, you can do this to add the ease. So you would spread your cap the amount you needed to make that measurement correct. And then if you ended up adding too much ease, I showed last week how to reduce the ease to make it work so you're not adding too much ease. But if the cap measurement matches, then you can do this adjustment, which just adds the ease by making the cap wider. Now you'll notice in this example of making the cap wider, I'm also adding a little bit to the bicep line. Okay, so I just want to point out here, if I just recolor my bicep line in here like this, I'm going to make it darker. You can see that I added a little bit extra there and a little bit extra there. That happens if you need more width to your cap. It's going to translate down to your bicep line a little bit, but where we really added it was up here at the top. Okay, so this could be kind of cool if you measure your bicep and you realize that the pattern measurement on the bicep line, which is, you've got to remember to take off your seam allowances here, so you're only going to measure from here to here, whatever that is, and then compare it to your bicep. If you just needed a smidge more and you needed more ease in your cap, you've taken care of both things at the same time. So you can see here, there's a little bit of ease being added right here and right here. It's not a lot, but if you just need a little bit, that can work if you also needed to, you know, add ease to your cap up here. But what if, and I've gotten this question, and I did show how to do this in my Facebook group, J Stern Designs Fit Sew Embroider. I showed a series of photos showing how to do this. But what if you measured your bicep line and you needed to add 2 inches? You can see doing this adjustment is not going to work. And I'm going to put a link in the description below to another slash and spread method where you can add a little bit of ease to your bicep line without adding ease to the cap. That is possible as well. I'm not going to do it in this video, but I'll put a link to how to do slash and spread to add about a ½ inch to each side. So you can add about a total of 1 inch to your bicep line, slashing and spreading using the method in the description of the video I'm going to link below. But again, what if you needed to add a significant amount? So I'm going to show you how to do that here because this is kind of a common fitting thing. And I think for the purposes of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the back of this paper and I'm just going to trace the original sleeve here. So let me just trace it because you need a copy. I'm going to show you how to slide and pivot, or pivot slide method of adding room on your bicep. So you need a copy of your sleeve and you need a traced, well, you need a traced copy of your sleeve and then you need the original sleeve. So I'm just going to transfer my notches here so I have them. And there's my, okay, so here is my sleeve. Okay, let's say we need to add 2 inches to the bicep line, and I'm going to show you how to do 2 inches to the bicep line on this tiny little sample just to show you that it is in fact possible. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to measure 1 inch out on each side of my bicep line. So this represents the additional inch that I need to add. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just create a L-shaped or perpendicular vertical line to that goes up a little bit. The length of this line does not matter. It's just a guideline. So this vertical line is just a guideline. I'm going to make one on this side as well. It's just keeping track of the distance that we need for our larger bicep. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our sleeve Oh, I'm going to have to make these a little bit longer. All right, so just so you know, this is like way too much for this small scale. I'm going to do it, but you're going to see what's going to happen here. It's going to really flatten out the cap. Let me just show you here. So this is like a teeny weeny little sleeve here. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to just line your sleeve up so it matches the traced copy, and you're going to pivot the sleeve until it reaches the line. And you can see, I don't even know if I can reach the line. It would be way up here. So that's not going to work. I wanted to try to do a really dramatic example, but that's too much for this size. Let's do a ½ inch. Let's pretend we're adding 1 inch, but also let's pretend, you know, that's a scale that makes sense. So I'm sorry about that. I got all excited about showing you a dramatic. This will still be dramatic. So this is now nothing. And just to keep me from looking silly, I'm just going to cut these off just so you don't get confused. Okay. All right, so here we are. I've added the amount on either side I need to add. And then I'm going to line my sleeve up, and I'm going to pivot this until the edge of the cap, where the underarm seam and the cap meet, touches that line, like that. And then I'm going to trace it like this. So I'm using the shape of the original cap to redraw the sleeve I'm going to use with the larger bicep. So once I do that, I'm going to pivot it in the opposite direction to get the same thing. And actually, I'm really screwing this up. This is 3/8. I think 3/8 is all I can do on this tiny little pattern. I'm sorry. Let me just make that accurate. All right, so this is 3/8 from here to here. This is 3/8 from here to here. All right. So just know on a full-size pattern, you'll be able to add a significant amount, probably even more than an inch, you know, and depending on the size you're working with. All right, so I'm just going to go here and I'm going to just draw this in. I'm just copying the original cap. So you can see now what's happened is my bicep line has gone up. It's gotten higher. So this was my original bicep line right here. Now my bicep line is up here. Okay, so it's here now. So you can see it's moved up. And notice our cap has gotten relatively, you know, it's gotten lower because the bicep line has moved up. But what has not happened is the length of the cap is exactly the same. So this looks a little morphed here because I'm working with a tiny example and I pushed it out as far as I could. First I tried to push it too far and then I got us down to where it will work. But I just want to trace off the final sleeve here. So we've got our new cap, like this. Oops. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're just going to redraw back down like this. So you are adding a little bit to the underarm seam, the length of it, because now it's higher, but basically that's going to be your new sleeve. So you can measure the distance from here to here and then redraw your, you know, your notches. So like if this is 1.5 inches away, then all I do is go 1.5 inches away here and just redraw my notches. So that is the new pattern. And of course, the center notch would stay the same. So wherever my center notch was, that would still stay the same. So that's the new pattern. And actually, remember I turned this upside down so I could match it into my armhole. So I kept it upside down. So that's why my front is over here and my back is over here. So I could have traced it like this, correct, and then it would have been back front. But basically, that's how you make a significant increase to your bicep without changing the length of your cap. So if you need information about how to adjust the cap height or the ease of the cap, check out last week's video. This week's video, I showed you how to determine how much ease you have so you can decide if you need to add ease. And, you know, just as a general guideline, I think woven shirt sleeves or caps should have anywhere from 1/2 inch to maybe 1.25 inches, depending on the size and style of the shirt and the shape of your body. If you know you've got a big ball, a shoulder ball, if you've got a prominent shoulders, having more ease in the cap is going to give you more room for your body inside. So you may want to increase the ease even if there is ease and it seems like it's the right amount of ease. If you sew your shirt together and it's very snug around your shoulder, you can go back and add ease. And then remember, if the cap is not high enough to reach from the tip of your shoulder down to your bicep line, that's where you need to add length. And I covered all of that last week. We've covered how to tell how much ease your cap has. We talked about how much ease you should have in a woven pattern. Keep in mind, in a knit sleeve, it could be 0, it could be a little bit. I wouldn't put more than a half an inch of ease in a knit pattern, but you could if you need, again, more room for your shoulder. And then you could also have negative ease in a knit top. So woven tops between a half an inch and an inch and a quarter, maybe an inch and a half in larger sizes, or if your body needs more. And then for a knit top, the max would be a half an inch, and then you could go down from there. And of course, I'm giving you these as general guidelines, but you may be outside that range. I mean, you may be outside that range depending on your shape. But those are general guidelines. You now know how to find out how much ease your cap has, and then check out last week's video to adjust it for cap height or cap width. And then if you need to adjust your bicep and it's a significant amount, do what I showed you here by tracing a copy of your pattern and doing the pivot and slide method to create a new cap. And then if you just need to add a little bit and you don't want to do this method, because this would work for a little bit or a lot, you could use this pivot and slide method for any amount of ease that you want to add at the bicep. But if you want to do the slash and spread method, I'm putting a link to that below as well. So next week, I'm going to do more sleeve fitting topics on Fit Tip Tuesday. This week on Wednesday, we got a notice from our Cox cable company that they're having a planned outage, and they're not telling us what time of the day that planned outage will be. So I may or may not get on for subscriber Q&A on Wednesday this week. I'm so sorry, but if I have internet, I will be on. And if I don't, I'm sorry. And then remember, I'm traveling to Central Pennsylvania to teach jeans fitting this weekend, so I won't be around for FabFit Friday. But I am working on my Easy Breezy summer shirt. I'm using the perfectly fitted shirt pattern from my collection to work on this. Thank you so much if you ordered the pattern. I got quite a few orders for the pattern to sew along with me. So if anybody is looking for that pattern to join the sew along, I'll put the links to those as well in the description below. So the description below this video is going to be very action-packed. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments about the sleeve fitting we've done so far. I will be adding to that next week. And thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate each and every one of you taking the time to follow along with me. So thank you, thank you. Have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you again soon.